Okay, so welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be uh, looking at some pretty big ideas like forgiveness,
Yeah.
sin, and we're going all the way back to the Garden of Eden for this one.
Wow, ambitious.
Yeah, well, we've got this text, right? And it really gets you thinking about forgiveness in a whole new way. And we're going to be putting that alongside the Adam and Eve story from Genesis. Should be interesting, huh?
Definitely. I mean, those stories, even though they're super old, they still kind of like speak to us today, don't they?
Yeah, for sure. Like something about being human, right?
Yeah.
This whole idea of messing up and needing to like start over or
So
whatever.
something fundamental there, yeah.
So this text we're looking at, it jumps right in with this definition of forgiveness that really made me stop and think.
Oh,
It
yeah.
says, forgiveness is agreeing to live with the consequences of another person's sin.
Hmm.
And it's not saying like, it's okay what they did or anything like that,
Yeah.
but it's making us face the fact that like other people's choices affect us, whether we like it or not.
That's so true. I mean, think about it, right? Has there ever been a time when, like, someone else's decision totally impacted your life?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, right. Could be family, could be friends. Heck, even like a political decision can change everything for you.
Oh, absolutely. Like the consequences are real. You can't escape them.
Exactly.
And what I found really interesting about how this source talks about forgiveness is like, it's not just some head thing,
Yeah.
It's not just logic.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It's emotional, right? It's
Yeah.
about dealing with the hurt that's like buried inside
Yeah.
from what that other person did.
Yeah, yeah, you have to acknowledge that pain, right? And then find a way to like move through it. The source talks about the bondage of bitterness. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Versus the freedom of forgiveness.
Oh, that's good.
It's like if you hold on to bitterness, it's like you're chained to the past, you know? But forgiveness is like opening a door and finally being able to move forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. But is it always like about letting go completely? I
Yeah.
mean, what about when someone really needs to be held accountable for what they did?
Oh, totally. That's a really good point.
Or like when part of the process is seeking justice?
Yeah, you can't just ignore that.
Right.
Forgiveness is definitely complicated, and it's not about like pretending nothing bad happened or anything.
Right, right.
Sometimes people need to face consequences for their actions, and sometimes justice needs to be served. This source, though, it's really focused on the internal side of things,
Yeah.
like the work you do within yourself to forgive.
Right.
But it's not saying that external stuff isn't important, too.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah,
I think it's good to acknowledge all that.
yeah,
So, okay, want to shift gears a bit.
sure.
There's this question in the source that really got me thinking.
Okay.
It asks, like straight up, what was the original sin?
Hmm, that's a good one.
Because, we hear about Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
We think we know the story, right? But it's actually way more nuanced than that.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It's not just like a simple, they ate an apple, end of story kind of thing.
Exactly.
The Adam and Eve story, the one we get in Genesis, it's packed with symbolism and layers of meaning. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's temptation, obviously, but also disobedience.
Yeah.
And there's this element of like wanting forbidden knowledge, like craving power.
Yeah. And speaking of forbidden knowledge, that feels so relevant today, right? I mean, come on, we are living in the information age, like overload.
Oh, for sure. It's everywhere.
Is there even such a thing as too much knowledge now?
That's a great question, honestly. If the original sin was about like seeking out forbidden knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Then how do we deal with this constant flood of information we're facing every single day? I mean, where are the boundaries?
Right. Where do we draw the line?
What information is actually helpful? And what's going to lead us down the wrong path?
Oh, man, that's a lot to think about. It makes you wonder, like, what are the forbidden fruits of today?
Ooh, I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it just like having unlimited access to information? Or is it that constant need to be validated on social media?
That's interesting.
It feels like temptation and easy access go like hand in hand these days.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have so much access to everything, right? But I think that makes it even more important to be careful about what we choose to let in.
Oh, for sure.
Discernment, right? Choosing carefully what we consume, what we believe, that takes real effort. And maybe that's part of what makes these old stories from the Bible so powerful.
How so?
They're tapping into these timeless human struggles that we're still dealing with today.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's another idea that this source brings up that I thought was really interesting. It talks about how even harm can be turned to good. Like even bad things can lead to something positive.
Oh, interesting.
It even quotes Genesis 50.2 again, where it says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Pretty powerful, huh?
Wow. Yeah. That really makes you think about perspective, doesn't it?
Right.
Like finding meaning, even in the tough stuff. It's not about minimizing the pain, but it suggests that even after something awful happens, there can be growth and transformation.
It's like finding the good, even when it's hard.
Exactly.
So this whole conversation has really got me thinking about personal responsibility.
Yeah, for sure.
The source asks, like, was it all Eve's fault?
Hmm.
Or, like, should Adam have stepped in and stopped her?
Yeah, classic blame game.
Right. But is that the whole story?
I don't think so. I think it's way more complicated than just pointing fingers.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we all have to take responsibility for our own choices,
Yeah,
right?
true.
But we're also part of, like, this bigger web. Our choices are influenced by other people, by the circumstances we're in, by, like, societal norms.
Oh, absolutely. It's never just one thing.
Exactly. And I think recognizing that complexity is really important.
So it's not about saying no one's responsible for anything, but it's about seeing the bigger picture.
Yes, exactly that. And it makes me think about what the text was saying about forgiving our partners.
Oh, right.
Even in our everyday relationships, like with our spouses or significant others, these ancient stories have something to teach us.
What do you mean?
They're full of lessons about love, trust, and taking responsibility, even when things get messy.
Yeah, for sure. Those are timeless themes, right?
Totally.
Okay, so speaking of timeless, can we talk about the Garden of Eden itself for a minute?
Oh, yes. Let's do it.
The source paints this picture, right? Based on Genesis 2:8-17. It's like total abundance. No one's lacking anything. It's paradise, basically.
It's such a vivid image. Like, you can almost feel it, right?
Surely.
The peacefulness, the beauty.
And yet, even in this perfect setting, things go wrong. What does that say about us? About human nature?
Ooh, that's a big one.
Right. I mean, do we just have this built-in capacity to mess things up?
It makes you think about desire, and about free will
Yeah.
and the consequences that come with it.
It's like even in paradise, there was this possibility for things to fall apart. Maybe that potential for things to go wrong is just part of what it means to be human.
Yeah, that's a powerful thought. And maybe that's why we keep coming back to these stories about sin and forgiveness. They speak to this tension within us,
What do you mean?
like this capacity for both good and bad, and this struggle to make choices that lead to something good
Yeah.
for ourselves and for the world around us.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. So we've covered a lot of ground here. I feel like we've learned that forgiveness is way more complex than we often think it is. The consequences of sin or messing up can go way further than we realize. And even paradise wasn't safe from human, fallibility.
That's a great summary. And I think as we consider those modern day gardens we're trying to protect in our own lives, right? It's so clear that the choices we make, they really matter.
They do.
They not only affect us, but they shape the world that we create for ourselves and for, everyone who comes after us.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot of pressure.
It is. But it's also pretty inspiring.
True.
Like, we have the power to choose
Right.
to make things better.
Well, on that note, we're going to leave you with one final thought to ponder.
Okay, shoot.
In a world where we're bombarded with information and there's temptation everywhere we look, how do we develop wisdom? How do we learn to discern what's right? How do we make choices that lead to true fulfillment, both for ourselves and for everyone else?
Ooh, that's a great question to sit with.
It is.
And hopefully this deep dive has given you some new ideas to consider as you explore that question for yourself.
Definitely. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.